Overview of galactic history. A parallel universe exists which is referred to as the Old Universe. This universe exists on its own timeline. The events that occurred in the Old Universe were very influential to the development of our universe. The civilization that existed in the Old Universe was called the Empire. The Empire controlled almost the entire universe and was extremely evil. In order to complete the capture of the entire universe, the scientists of that civilization created entities called Mind Eaters. The Mind Eater was a geoplasmic energetic entity that attached itself to the physical brain and auric energies of the being it invaded, removing the being's thought patterns and replacing it with new empiric programming. The scientists released these entities into unconquered worlds and also used them to program their own people. Imagine their shock when they realized that these entities could multiply themselves. When a Mind Eater absorbed a certain amount of energy, it split into two separate entities. Eventually, the Mind Eaters became uncontrollable and started feeding on their own creators, the Old Universe's form of AIDS. Over a period of centuries, there was virtually no life left in the Old Universe except for the Mind Eaters. The only escape from them was physical death. A small band of survivors within the Emperor's court, or inner circle, created technology that allowed the survivors to physically transport to another universe, escaping both death and the Mind Eaters. Unfortunately, the band of survivors entered this universe during the time of the Lyrian civilization. This is the only way that DNA from another universe physically manifests in an alternate universe. Otherwise, there is no physical link. Thus, our universe became contaminated. Satan wished to create a model universe for his beliefs. He almost achieved that in the Old Universe, but divine plan thwarted his ambitions. His own satanic creations are the means for his destruction. Satan's goal was to totally control all physical universes and lock them off from salvation. Because he almost controlled the entire Old Universe through the negative 9 aspects of the mind of God that he created, the importance of salvation in this universe and all others is evident. Satan still wants to control the minds of all beings so that the only link they have to the mind of God is what he allows. A group of beings descended angels, demons, who operated at the right hand of Satan and created a civilization within this universe using the DNA from the Old Universe. They developed into the Draco, cold-blooded reptilian, whose purpose was to create a left-brain influence and support structure for the contamination that entered this galaxy. At the center of the galaxy was the Lyrian civilization, which was borderline E.T./physical reality. Totally right brain, it was Christ-like, etheric, and very noble. The Lyrians were the greatest culture ever known to this galaxy. Their sphere of influence covered not only this galaxy but many around it for millions of years. Without physical bodies in their pure state, they had bodies made of light. Their first colony on Earth was the beginning of the original Atlantean civilization, which was etheric ET-like. The dolphin and whale population, warm-blooded, mammalian, was its first attempt at physical structure. Because the Lyrians had no point of comparison for negativity, they were easily deceived by the survivors of the Old Universe, who were accepted as brothers in Christ. Eventually, the Lyrians realized that their civilization was in jeopardy from the infiltrators from the Old Universe as well as from the Draco. They decided to create a balance in physical form between themselves and their opposites in hope of preventing conflict. This was the creation of the amphibian race, hybrid of reptilian mammalian, and was a gigantic galactic, intergalactic, and interuniversal experiment. The amphibian races were designed by Ohiu through the Syrians to be a bridge. Oalu Council is an E.T./angelic group that has the function of tabernacle, that which covers and protects and acts as a bridge. Its purpose is to span the gap between physical reality and true reality. This book is one of their projects. Because physical beings cannot mate with etheric beings, and all of the Old Universe survivors were males, the survivors recreated themselves genetically through the process of cloning. Now temptation existed for the lofty Lyrians to incarnate into physical bodies. This was the beginning of their end. Gradually more and more Lyrians descended into physical bodies to experience physical reality from a physical body instead of a light body. The mere idea of descension into physical reality is a temptation that causes an imprisonment through DNA and the need for salvation. In response, the ET group who performed the Oalu function volunteered to descend a portion of itself to act as a bridge, or balance, for this incorrect pattern. This group became known as Sirius E. As the Lyrian Empire degenerated, factions developed as DNA was manipulated and altered to suit the various environments in which the light beings now lived. Physical bodies were designed to accommodate the atmospheres and conditions of the various planets that encompassed the Lyrian civilization. This galactic civilization, once comprised of unified beings, each identical to the other, was now confronted with differences in body type, resulting in separation of races. Now they had no choice but to follow the pattern of the 12 rays emanating from the mind of God, thereby producing the 12 frequencies, or main galactic root races. At the same time, the negative side, Draconian race, developed into the reptilian and eventually insect species. The Draco Empire also had colonies modeled along the Old Universe Empire. They colonized the Earth by driving the Moon, which is actually an artificial vehicle, into orbit. Their first colony on Earth was known as Lemuria. Androgynous and extremely physical, these beings existed side by side with the etheric ET Atlantean civilization. The positive side of the same energy developed along human and mammalian species. In accordance with the incorrect mind pattern of being special or supreme, many of the 12 races of this Lyrian civilization rebelled against the other, each seeking dominance. This was the end of that civilization as it was known, leaving the 12 groups open for attack by a strongly unified Draco. Many horrendous battles ensued, civil war, and lasted many centuries and in fact, still occur. In their effort to create balance, the Syrians gave technology to both sides to keep them equal. Thus began the loss of purpose for the Syrians as they were tempted into becoming merchants and peddlers of technology. Parts of the old Lyrian civilization were absorbed into the Draco Empire. Among these were the star systems of Rigel, Zeta Reticuli 1, and Zeta Reticuli 2, which have since become known as the Orion Confederation. Another group formed called the Pleiadian Council. The Pleiadians were refugees from the original Lyrian star system. The Pleiades is a group of 7 stars with 16 inhabited planets. The Pleiadian Council had the intention of recreating a physical version of the original Lyrian civilization modeled after the old empire from the old universe. One group of Pleiadians which was adverse to this followed their ET ancestors to Earth. They started what is known as the First Physical Atlantean Empire, or the Second Atlantean Cycle known as the Atlantes. The first cycle was an etheric ET-type colony comprised of the original Lyrian civilization. All of this activity was duly noted by other groups within other galaxies. Never before in this universe had such a division between left and right taken place. A congress, or council, convened in the Andromeda Galaxy, closest to Milky Way, on a planet called Tatona. Comprised of many civilizations and groups throughout the immediate area of the universe, this group decided that the solar system at the edge of the Milky Way would be an experimental area for the purpose of rebuilding the 12 rays, which were now 12 root races. Many of these root races branched off into sub-races. Earth was destined to be a focal point for the salvation of the soul. Monitored from a Sirian outpost on Mars, different races representing the 12 root races, as well as those representing the negative side, would be brought to this one place to convert the negative side and release the positive side from DNA bondage. In addition to the introduction of genetic programming known as Kundalini, which was created for the purpose of salvation, there was the introduction of an object known as the Crystal Skull. There was also the introduction of a being, or model prototype, called the Savior that would show the way back to true reality. The head group within the council and Hatona known as the Krull monitored the physical situation in the Milky Way. One of the major civilizations in the Andromeda Galaxy, they were light beings who used physical bodies whenever necessary. There were several groups that opposed colonization on Earth. One group known as Marduk had its own agenda. They created an artificial world also known as Marduk filled with beings whose purpose was to traverse the galaxy upgrading what they considered to be low-level or animalistic DNA or genetics to create a new race. The beings of Marduk known as the Abenaki and Anunnaki are not adverse to the use of slavery. Their vehicle was driven into our solar system with a force that destroyed the fifth planet that existed between Mars and Jupiter, explaining why there is an asteroid belt in that area. The Syrians rescued much of that civilization before the destruction, bringing them to both Mars and Earth underground. Marduk continued on its way toward the Earth, flipping it on its axis, thus causing the first cataclysm of Atlantis. In order to remove the Atlantes and Draco from Earth, the Nordics, who are in control of the Pleiadian Council, took advantage of the situation. Working with the Abenaki, they created a slave race from primate genetics which developed into the Black Race. At the same time, severe battles ensued between the allies of the Nordics and the Abenaki against the Draco-Lemurians. When the Draco realized that they would be driven off the planet Earth, they prepared vast underground bases that were kept in suspended animation for future time. They also created beings called the Taras, a cross between humanoid and Draco. Placed inside the Earth, they remain there to this day until the time of revelation is complete. Many of the Draco-Lemurians fled to Venus. The amphibians were attacked for being a balance between the two groups. They sealed much of their civilization in underwater chambers guarded by the dolphins and whales. The remainder of the amphibians fled to Titan, which is a moon of Neptune. The Orion Confederation decided to create a race of beings out of humanoid genetics to monitor the occurrences on Earth for the Draco. Famous for abducting humans, they are the 4-foot and 3-foot greys with the black wrap-around eyes and are under the control of the Rigelians, who work directly for the Draco Empire. The Rigelians were once part of the Lyrian civilization and were physically equal to the tall blondes or Nordics. During the Draco invasion of that sector, civil war, their planet was so bombarded and contaminated by nuclear waste that they degenerated into a genetically and hormonally weak race which survives by using the life material of others. In the meantime, the survivors of the fifth planet developed into a civilization known as the Sumerians using Syrian aid. Simultaneously, the Third Atlantean Empire developed and was quite evil. Divided into two religions, one was called the Children of the Law of One, and the other the Sons of Belial. Belial was a Draconian god. Infiltrating this civilization were the influences of the Syrians, the Pleiadians, and the Orion Confederation, each vying for dominance. In response to this hostility, many of the inhabited interior galaxy worlds bonded together to form the Galactic Federation. During the last 2,000 years of the Third Atlantean civilization, horrendous genetic experiments were performed by the Atlanteans and aliens. Slaves were necessary in the mind pattern of these people since they relished technology and a life of leisure. Beings who were part human, part animal insect were developed to perform various tasks. This was done because there was a certain impure strain and genetic material available. During the initial colonization on Earth when the light beings first appeared, many attempted to incarnate in animal bodies to experience Earth. When they finally hardened into physical form with the influx of the Atlanteans, many retained animal features in addition to their humanoid form. The same occurred for the Lemurians, whose genetics included dinosaur reptilian DNA. When the two groups finally merged at the end of the Lemurian civilization, the reptilian brain became a central feature in the new human prototype. Herein lies the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. The role of Kundalini, represented by the curl of the coiled snake reptilian, is necessary as a method to overcome the lower side of existence. During this time period, colonies were created on Earth from Arcturus, Antares, Tau Ceti, Procyon, Sirius B, and several other races. It was also determined by the Council on Hatona that it was Marduk's responsibility to monitor the new race it had created. The problem was that Marduk was on a programmed orbit through the galaxy, only coming near the Earth once every 12,000 years. During the periods when Marduk was not in the area, it monitored its creations through an alien race known as the Bear, who are under the direct control of the Anunnaki. The last time that Marduk passed through the solar system, the last portions of Atlantis sank beneath the sea. The Atlanteans had so abused the magnetic field of the Earth and weakened the axis stability so dramatically that nothing could be done to prevent the Earth from flipping on its axis. Marduk is scheduled to return in 1998. The Earth shifting on its axis will raise Atlantis as a result of this. Symbolically, the sinking of Atlantis was the submergence of the right brain, leaving the left brain unchecked. The next axis shift will bring Atlantis above the surface, and all the records will be revealed, including those beneath the Sphinx and in the Yucatan. When Atlantis sank for the last time, its refugees fled to its various colonies around the Earth. Some fled to newly created lands such as North America. The colony in Egypt, Kem, was guided by the beings of Sirius A. The colony in northwestern Europe, Celts, was guided by the beings of Pleiades. The colony in North America, East Coast Indians, was guided by the beings of Procyon. During the period that the Syrians influenced the Egyptian civilization, further genetic purification was needed. The Hebrew race was introduced by the Syrians as a further attempt to overcome the reptilian brain and balance the left brain and right brain. Symbolically, the Hebrew race is a pineal gland through which global Kundalini can rise by way of a Christ figure emerging. DNA is programmed to be released at various stages until this is accomplished. The separation of the children of Israel from bondage in Egypt is symbolic of the separation of the pineal gland from the left brain. Egypt is representative of ego. The 12 tribes of Israel represent the 12 frequencies as they relate to Earth and their unification back to the source. People now live in what might be called the end of time, or the final stages of the 9th completion of the Book of Revelation programming. All frequencies are returning to claim their own, and in the purification of their frequencies on Earth, they themselves will be purified, leading to the perfection of the illusion for each of the 12 rays and allowing for return to the mind of God. The purpose of DNA will be fulfilled for some, but for others a time of tribulation and further imprisonment will be necessary. DNA, represented by chains, symbolically refers to Satan and his angels imprisoned in the abyss of physical reality. Their DNA will be reprogrammed until their cycle is complete. The ET level of existence has several experiments and projects along these lines. The encoding of DNA is of paramount concern to them. Over the course of history, many humans have been removed to other places in the universe for development along different lines. Those humans who will be taken away during this cycle refer to this as the rapture. Even within the solar system, laboratories exist stored with genetic material to be used if and when necessary for further experiments. The Syrians have similar laboratories on Mars, the Draco on Venus, the Amphibians on Neptune, and Triton, the Pleiadians on the moons of Jupiter, the Orion Confederation on the moon, some ET groups on the moons of Saturn. Many of the moons within this solar system are not natural objects, but rather giant observation posts and laboratories. The Draco are already driving a ship into the solar system that will be used as a second moon. Some groups have the intention of stopping this craft by crashing the planet Jupiter into it. The resulting explosion and chemical reaction would turn Jupiter into a second sun, thus creating a binary star system. If this occurs, the effect on the other planets will be devastating.